Get started. Thank you for showing up early and on a cold morning. Got some great presentations this morning. I'm Sue Craig, chair of the session this morning, which we have called Designing a Sustainable Mining Future. So just a few housekeeping items for those of you that haven't downloaded the app yet. There's still, I think, a chance to get in on the scavenger hunt, so feel free to do that. Posters are still open in the Longhouse today, and core shacks will be open the next two classrooms during breaks and lunch. And sessions do end at 3 today. There's a closing reception, so just keep that in mind. And lunch is also hosted as well again today by Hecla. Want to thank our patron sponsors for the conference, BMC, Canor, and Yukon Government. And this morning's session is sponsored by Neighbourly North, so thank you to them for supporting the session. So we have three speakers this morning, and I will start with the first, introducing the first speaker, and I'm going to get the title wrong, Cezul, hopefully, from Remediation and Reconciliation. So Lou Spagnuolo is a special advisor in mine reclamation at Parsons. So Lou has worked on been a long week, has worked on contaminated sites projects across the north for over 20 years. During his role as Director General of the Northern Contaminated Sites Program, he managed, directed, and oversaw the execution of some of Canada's most significant projects with varied delivery approaches, including the Faro Mine, Giant Mine, Mount Nansen, United Keno Hills, and Silver Bear Mines. He's currently a special advisor on mine reclamation projects with Parsons. Lou is a graduate of the University of Windsor's Environmental Engineering program and a professional engineer and project management professional. Also a graduate of the University of Ottawa Masters of Business Administration program. So please welcome Lou to the stage.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me today, and hopefully I can provide some information on the Faro Mine project. This is going to be a quick overview of the Faro project, a quick little update on what's going on at site, and then also just talking a little bit of how we're trying to shift the project not only from a remediation process or project to more of a reconciliation project, working with the Government of Canada and many of our partners on this project. So thanks again for coming out. Feel free to approach me afterwards if we don't have enough time for questions. Here all day as well. Or reach out afterwards if you have any questions on Faro or would like to discuss any other projects that Parsons is working on, including the Cantong Mine, Eagle Mine, and other mines as well, including Giant Mine and the NWT. So first off, we'd like to acknowledge that the Faro Mine is located on the traditional territory of the Ross River Dene Council, and that's extremely important in the work that we do. This has been passed down from the Government of Canada to Parsons and all of our subcontractors. It's extremely important that the work that we do at Faro recognizes the historical impacts that the Faro Mine operation had on the community of Ross River and the town of Faro as well, and also the traditional territory that Faro occupies. So first I'll talk about a little bit about the roles and responsibilities of the Faro project. There's a lot of folks around the table, many companies. Many of you have probably worked on Faro either directly or indirectly. So we'll talk about the current folks around the table, current companies that are working at the project. We'll touch on the site location just briefly. Many of you know where it is, so I won't spend too much time on that. We'll talk about the remediation project status, so where we're at in the timeline of the remediation of the project. We'll talk about where we're focusing on the partnership approach with the delivery of this project, how it's working at Faro, what we're doing, what are some of the next steps, and also the socioeconomic results that we've noticed to date, and then what we're doing next. So the roles and responsibilities at the project, again, a lot of folks around the table. This is a significant project that requires a lot of different input and a lot of different perspectives. So the Government of Canada is the project funder. They're ultimately responsible for the delivery of the project to Canadians. Ross River are the land stewards. We see them as very responsible for making sure that the work that we do, it reflects their traditional territory and their traditional roles on the project. Parsons' role currently is as the main construction manager and the care and maintenance contractor, so we have a dual role at sites right now. So as a construction manager, our responsibility is to provide project management, procurement. We hire a lot of the contractors, the subcontractors that do the work at the site, and we oversee that work on behalf of the Government of Canada. And then as the care and maintenance contractor, we're also self-performing, so doing the actual care and maintenance work at the site. So we have a dual role at Faro. And we've been at Faro on and off for many years, and so we have a lot of experience at the site and a lot of expertise that we can bring to the table. There's also a number of engineering firms that are also participating in the project, including AECOM, the remediation plan designer. They're developing the design itself of what the remediation work is going to look like. WSP, the Regulatory Support Services, they've prepared the YESA project proposal and also the water license application and other things. And Faro doing environmental monitoring at site, and Tetra Tech for geotechnical support. Again, many other players at the table. These are some of the major ones, but lots of folks are on the table. And it's important that all of these folks work together to achieve success. So that's the critical thing for us. So the site location, just outside of the town of Faro, you can see here the traditional territory of the Kaska people, and the closest community of Ross River Dena Council, about 90 kilometers from site, how important it is, how important this site is to that community, and why it's important for us to respect that traditional territory and recognize the opportunity for reconciliation for this project. We're also upstream of the Selkirk First Nation, and you can see the location here, in the Yukon Territory in relation to the British Columbia and Northwest Territories. The nearest town is the town of Faro, about 15 kilometers from site, and it's important that we have a good working relationship with the town and council there as well, and the people that live in the town of Faro, because the work that we do obviously could have a big impact on the community itself. So the Faro mine site is actually split up into two separate areas. One is the Faro mine site itself, which you'll see here, and there's also the Van Gorda property. I'll focus on the Faro mine site for my presentation. Here you can see the main features are the open pit, which is the green blob, if you will, in the upper right-hand corner. It's surrounded by roughly 300 million tons of acid-generating waste rock that needs to be addressed. All the green lines that you can see across the site are actually either diversion channels or natural streams. And so it's important to keep those from becoming contaminated, so keeping clean water clean and keeping dirty water from getting into the clean water. So that's a big focus of the project long term. In the bottom left-hand corner, there's the tailings area, as well as some tailings dam. You can see one of the tailings dams is green water and the other one is red water, just on of contaminant, the red being iron. And that's also a big concern as well, or a part of the project is reinforcing the dams and making sure the tailings are properly covered. Obviously the tailings are also generating a lot of acid, and metals can leach into the environment. So the big focus on Faro long term is really to cover a lot of the waste rock to prevent it from becoming, from releasing additional metals into the environment, and covering and capping the tailings as well. So the Faro site, we always have the tendency to say, size-wise, it's hard to tell from videos. It's always impressive when you drive up to it. I've been going to the site for over a decade now, and every time I go, it still impresses me. We say the entire site is roughly the size of the city of Victoria, just to give you a sense of how big it is. And from this perspective, it's hard to tell the heights on things, but in this photo here on the bottom left-hand corner, you can kind of see the height of the waste rock piles, some of them in excess of 100 meters thick, so significant material to deal with. So a little history on where we are with the remediation project itself. The project and all its stakeholders agreed to the 5 key project objectives a number of years ago, and that's been driving the development of the remediation plan over the years. The key are protecting human health and the environment, but also consideration for cost and returning the site to an acceptable state, pre-mining land use. That, again, is very important in driving the development of the remediation plan going forward. The remediation plan itself, I touched on a little bit on the earlier slide, but it's really upgrading the dams, resloping the waste rock and installing covers, upgrading the stream diversions, and upgrading the contaminated water collection systems across site. Faro itself, it's a relatively simple site to remediate. It's not as complicated as, for example, the giant mine in the NWT. It's really a lot of moving rock. But the key here is going to be water treatment, which is likely going to be required for hundreds of years, if not in perpetuity. So the next steps where we're currently at, the project is very close to completing the environmental assessment process. The Government of Canada is also working on the water license application, which they're hoping to submit next year. The expectation is that will take 2 to 3 years to get through the water licensing process, and then full remediation will begin in roughly 2028. There's a lot more information on the project itself, updates on what's going on, some key activities that are going on that the Government of Canada prepares, and that's called the faromine.ca website. Lots of great information on there, and also a lot of contacts if you want more information on the project itself from the Government of Canada. And then Parsons also holds its own, or has created its own website called faromineproject.ca. Again, a lot of information about job opportunities with the project are available through there. Contracting opportunities are posted through that website as well. So there's a lot of information that's available that Parsons puts out through the faromineproject.ca. So I encourage you to go to both of those websites to check them out. So we'll talk a little bit about the partnership approach that we're taking at this project. Again, led by the Government of Canada as project leader and project funder, but Parsons plays a big role in this approach. So we've laid it out on the consultation spectrum that you see here, going from the least you can do from the inform side of things, through consultation, through involving, through collaborating, and through empowering the work that goes on at site. So from an information sharing perspective, the Government of Canada prepares newsletters on a quarterly basis to provide information to the public as well as the community and what's going on at the project. And there's a lot of information sharing that goes on between the various groups as well. Building up from that, on the consultation side of things, there's many community consultations that occur. For example, the design itself, to advance the design, to develop the project objectives, to develop the remediation design itself. There was a very thorough and exhaustive consultation process that took place over many years to gather input from community members, chief and council, mayors and council, and the general public to help develop that design. So that obviously it delays or extends the time it takes to develop a design, but in general, you feel like you have a more robust design through that process. The Government of Canada also hosts a lot of site tours, and Parsons also participates and takes a lot of folks on site tours as well of the site, so folks can see the property, see what's been changing, what's been going on at the project. Next, on the involved side of things, it's really a lot of technical workshops. And again, this is to help develop a lot more detail, to get really down into the weeds of a lot of the designs, so that the plans can be developed that respect the reconciliation approach that's going forward. On the environmental monitoring side of things, again, making sure that the community is involved in the environmental monitoring process to ensure that we're capturing all the monitoring that not only is important from a regulatory perspective, but also to make the community feel safe on what's going on at the site. And there's also community-based training programs that we've worked with through the communities, including mine rescue training, providing training that's not only good for the project itself, but is also transferable that staff can use to go to other projects and other sites. On the collaboration standpoint, the Government of Canada has implemented a project governance structure that reflects a collaborative approach. And so there's many committees that have been established including senior management or senior officials at various levels of government, as well as the community itself, chief and council, all the way down to the lowest level, so that officials and participants can be involved in the project governance overall. That has been adjusted over the years. It's always being tweaked. But the intent here is to try to make it, try to ensure that our stakeholders, our partners are involved in the entire process of the Faro project. There's also community-led programs that are developed. And again, that's a collaborative approach where the community has a large role in developing the programs that are implemented at the site, including areas that they're most interested in, such as fish and fish habitat, revegetation, and wildlife monitoring. On the revegetation strategy side of things, the Government of Canada has been working with Ross River in particular to gather seeds from the area that can be used for revegetation of the site in the future. And they're also working with them to actually revegetate portions of the property now. In fact, they've planted well over 100,000 trees in the last 3 to 4 years. The community has themselves. So great initiatives to work with the community on. And finally, on the empower side of things, which is where we're shifting our focus, and really Parsons plays a big role in this empowerment side of things. There are teaching circles and cultural events that the Government of Canada puts on, but there's also a lot of opportunities through procurement, through Indigenous opportunities considerations. That's what we call the process to allow to provide points, extra points for Indigenous companies or Indigenous commitments through contracts and subcontracts that a lot of that Parsons puts out, including fuel supply, camp ownership, and heavy equipment. Camp ownership is a prime example of an empowerment activity where Parsons Canada and Denonezity Development Corporation, who's the development arm of the Ross River Dene Council, sat down. We listened to them, tried to understand where they were interested in developing their business, and camp ownership was one of the areas that was identified as an area of interest. So we worked with, Parsons has worked with Denonezity to help develop that camp ownership. And now Denonezity is one of the largest camp providers in the Yukon. So, from 7 years ago, we went from a very, very small camp to next year, the expectation is that they'll be likely installing a camp, 250 to 300 people at site. So working with the community and with the development corporation to develop their side of the business the way they want to develop it, not the way we need them to, but how they want to develop it. Fuel supply is another example. Tutolini Fuel from Ross River has grown into a very large business, in large part with a lot of the supply that they're providing a lot of the fuel for site, and we actually provide that to our subcontractors, the availability of fuel through Tutolini. So kind of making it an opportunity to grow the business as much as we can. And then heavy equipment is the next area where we're focusing on with Denonezity to develop more opportunities to provide heavy equipment for the site. As I mentioned, Faro itself is a relatively simple project. It's a lot of dig and dump and moving material, so there's going to be need for a lot of heavy equipment, and that's an opportunity that we can focus on. So the partnership approach that we're using at Faro is really an opportunity to recognize, respect, listen is the big thing. Being able to hear from the community, from the companies, what they want to develop and what they want to do, and then working with them to help develop those opportunities at the site. So just a few examples. On the top right is some of the equipment that Denonezity now owns. A lot of the other photos on the bottom is the tree planting that's going on. Bottom left is ribbon cutting that occurred at one of the projects at the site, and seed collection at the top left. So a lot of the different opportunities that are going on at site tours on the bottom right-hand side. So some of the results that we've experienced so far, Parsons in particular, Canada takes a larger approach, so they'll have statistics for the entire project, but Parsons, as the construction manager and the care and maintenance contractor, we collect a lot of statistics and data on Indigenous employment and training, as well as Yukon information as well. And so this is some of the statistics from our work, Parsons' work themselves. So we've been the interim construction manager and care and maintenance contractor from 2016 to 2022, so that's 6 years. And then also the main construction manager for the last 2 years. So these are the statistics over the last 8 years that Parsons has been managing the project. So As the construction manager, so the work that we subcontract, we've awarded over $30 million in subcontracts to Cascadena subcontracting or suppliers. So that represents about 25% of the work that's going on at site. It's a great start, but there's lots of room for improvement there. So we're working with them to try to increase that. And then as the care and maintenance contractor, we also purchased roughly $23.5 million in care maintenance, either supplies or activities, services through Cascadena suppliers. So in total, over the last 8 years, roughly $54 million in work from Cascadena subcontractors and suppliers. And then from of employment, which is roughly 18% of all the work that went on through subcontracts that Parsons has awarded over the last 8 years. And similarly, over 64,000 hours in care and maintenance activities that have occurred at site. So in total, over almost 130,000 hours of employment through the either subcontracting or care and maintenance activities over the last 8 years. And then similarly, I mean, employment and subcontracting is great, but it's also building the capacity for future generations to participate in the project. The Faro project is a multi-generational project. We're going to be there for many, many years. So there's an opportunity to work on training the youth of today, if you will, or current, staff or employees to try to build their capacity to promote them within the system. So from a training perspective, almost 33,000 hours of training has been provided to Cascadena citizens, either through direct employment or through care and maintenance activities. And then we also look at, again, developing, the opportunities for the future. We've awarded a $3,000 scholarship to a Casca student, and there's actually currently a $2,500 opportunity out there right now for another Casca student for a scholarship. And we are going to continue that in future years as well. So those are from some of the perspective from the Cascadena, but there's also opportunities that we provide for the Yukon economy. We provided over 500,000 hours of employment to Yukoners and over 44,000 hours of training to Yukoners. So again, great opportunity, this project. It will continue for many, many years. And so we're hoping to continue to build on that and improve these results. So some of the next step we've talked about, it's a good start. We're looking to continue the momentum, working with all our partners, in particular the Government of Canada and others, to continue the process of reconciliation through this project or using this project reconciliation. And that includes advancing, more information, providing more information out there, consulting more frequently and more often, involving community members as much as possible in the project itself, to collaborate with them, to empower, in particular, thinking about, what does the community itself, what do interested partners want advance, not just what we need, not necessarily, but what matching what we need with what they want to develop as well. So there's been, over the last, I would say, 10 years, there's been a lot of what we call urgent works, emergency works being completed at the Faro Mine project, and that's where a lot of the statistics you've seen so far has been a result of that work that's been going on, including, as an example, an $80 million project to divert the North Fork Rose Creek around some contamination. There will continue to be urgent works that will be implemented over the next few years. And again, we'll try to take advantage of that and try to use those as opportunities for reconciliation. And then ultimately, when the full remediation project starts in 2028 and beyond, there'll be significant opportunities to advance as much as we possibly can. Taking the lessons learned we have up till today and hopefully applying them for the future. So I want to thank you very much for listening in. We do have time for a little bit of questions, if you will. I want to thank the Government of Canada, Denonezidi, and others in the development of the presentation itself and the partnership approach that we've taken up till now.
I have one. Just once the remediation starts, the time frame on how long that would be?
Sure. Yeah, so the expectation is it's likely going to be about 12 to 15 years to implement the remediation project itself. That may change depending on the water licensing process that the project still has to go through. And the government of Canada, again, the timeline that they've developed, this 12 to 15 years, is actually part of that consultation process that we talked about. They actually developed that schedule based on consultations with the communities and with the town. In reality, the project can be completed in likely 6 to 7 years, but that's very aggressive, and that means you've got a lot of economic opportunity in a very short amount of time. And so in discussions with communities, they wanted to stretch that out as long as possible, right? So in an ideal world, if it took 20 years, then your economic impacts are stretched over 20 years, which is a much more positive thing for the community. And so working with the communities, the Government of Canada and the partners around the table, the engineers, the designers, have come up with a middle of the road 12 to 15 years, which would strike the balance between doing things very aggressively and stretching things out as much as possible. So this 12 to 15 year time frame ideally means that more opportunities will be available for Yukoners to take advantage of this project rather than, being so significantly large that we would need a lot of southern contractors to come up to do the work. So, 12 to 15 years starting in 2028 or so. And then after the remediation work is actually completed, that'll be the heavy work. There's also many, many years of post-remediation work, including adaptive management, which means adjusting the plans to make sure that they were implemented properly. And also monitoring and water treatment likely for hundreds of years, if not in perpetuity.
Is there water treatment happening now, or can you comment on that?
Yeah, so we've been treating water at Faro since the site was abandoned in 1998. A new, what we call interim water treatment system was installed. It was brand new to replace the old system. It was there from before. That new system was installed, I want to say in 2015-ish, around that time frame. And the government's actually working right now to develop new designs for a permanent water treatment plant that will be used to treat, the expectation is to treat all remediation and post-remediation as well. And so that likely will, the work to construct that will likely happen within the next 3 to 5 years. Yep. Good question. So the question was the overall budget for the project. Right now, the estimate is, in the billions, in the low billions, a couple billion, $1 to $2 billion is the estimate. But the Government of Canada will likely update their estimate once they go through the water licensing process, because then you'll have a better sense of what the scope of the actual project is, incorporating all the requirements from the water licensing and the EA process. So stay tuned for probably an updated number within the next few years. Yep.
A follow-up question from that. I mean, as soon as you get into the billions of dollars, the probability of over time, over budget, this escalates rapidly. So, are there any contingencies for that to happen so this can be completed as a project? Because this, with the complexity, the cost, the time frame, it is likely to exceed initial estimates.
Yeah, so the question is, the $1 billion project, obviously, there's opportunity, there's higher risk for the project to have cost overruns, schedule overruns. So there's a number of things that we do to implement to ensure we keep costs under control and keep schedule under control, but there's always that risk. The Government of Canada has created a program called the Northern Abandoned Mine Reclamation Program, specifically to manage the largest contaminated sites, the contaminated mine sites in the north, and Faro was one of those. And they created that program a number of years ago, specifically recognizing the fact that these are very large projects that will require significant funding and commitments from the Government of Canada for the long term. And so that gives us more assurance that the funding is there, secured, and it will likely be more than sufficient to manage the project for the long term.
Thanks, Lou. Much appreciated.